The teacher asked a question. He said, "Do you like doing or do you like planning?" When it came to me, the answer was, "Well, I'm a hands-on person. I really like the doing." The point he made at the end of this lesson after asking everybody was, "Well, we've been planning to clean the restrooms, so there's the mops over there for the doers." President of the company gets angry, yells at the assistant gets angry, yells at the person in the operations plant, they get angry, yell at the person in the mailroom, they get angry, yell at the FedEx driver. FedEx driver goes home, dog walks in front of him at the wrong time, and he kicks the dog. That trickle effect, it would be better for everybody if the president just drove to the FedEx driver's house and kicked the dog and left everybody else out of it. Any organization I work in, I have this poster on the wall. System, procedure, personnel. You can take every problem that exists in business and put it into one or more of those categories. And it's very important to identify, what are we working on?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Quiet Work Podcast. Today, we are going to talk about executive leadership, management, entrepreneurship, and even operational excellence. I'm bringing in an expert who has a lot of experience in all of those matters. David, please introduce yourself and tell us about the company you represent.
Hello, Matt. Thank you very much for the opportunity to join you and your audience. Really looking forward to the conversation today. I'm David Wagner. I've been an entrepreneur and a business leader for my entire business career. Really enjoy and center around systems and integration of systems and the leadership side of how people work together with those systems. Currently, I am working as a VP of technology in a private equity firm owned manufacturing organization.
I would like to take us back to the last conversation. Last conversation we had, there was a moment where you were approached by a professor who asked you a question that had a big impact on your life, and the doers versus planners. Which one are you?
Yeah, that was a great experience in my life. Even starting at 14 years old, working in car washes and different labor type jobs, I learned I was a great doer. I really loved doing the work. I never questioned whether or not I should be asked to do something, or it just was, my understanding was, you have a job, you're paid to do what they ask you, you do what they ask you. They ask you to clean the bathrooms, clean the bathrooms. And I always had an interest in entrepreneurship in business. The life for me wasn't about anything other than learning how to make it to the next rung of the ladder in my life. And a lot of that centered around your income and what you do as a job. I think you've really got to enjoy doing what you do, and it can't just be a means to an end. It's got to be fulfilling. So in one of my business finance classes, the teacher asked a question. He said, "Do you like doing or do you like planning?" And when it came to me, the answer was, "Well, I'm a hands-on person. I really like the doing." And the point he made at the end of this lesson after asking everybody was, "Well, we've been planning to clean the restrooms, so there's the mops over there for the doers." And I thought, well, what are they really teaching us? There's nothing wrong or bad about being a planner or being a doer. But what they drew out over the rest of the class was that there's different trajectories. There's different paths that those take. And if you really enjoy the doing and you want to enjoy your work, but you become a planner, the planning usually does not include the hands-on. And the hands-on, not including the planning means the planning doesn't include the hands-on. So but what I learned about myself is that I really like both. So how do you do that? And the answer there is, well, entrepreneurship, building your own model, or finding one that you fit in that kind of fits there. But that was a really important life lesson for me in my journey and in a career, was being able to separate, where do you fit? I think The Matrix really got it really well. There was a scene where they were discussing how Neo got in front of the Oracle, and she said, "You know what that says above there? Know thyself." And that, I think, is one of the keys to enjoying your life, is knowing where you should be, how to place yourself there. And that particular finance teacher really helped me understand that there's a kind of in the corporate world, a line in the sand between the people who plan and the people who do.
That is such a great story. I will remember it forever because that brings so many memories when I decided to learn about myself, to know myself, to get to the point where I know myself a little bit better. Because I guess this story never ends to learning about knowing yourself. I decided to study myself even more and travel the world, joined all kinds of different ventures, and said yes too many times probably. And that's a great story and you shown the true entrepreneur in me that I like doing both. Can I do both? There's only one path towards that entrepreneurship, and then you've done it. So if I look back, you started your entrepreneurial journey at the age of 21. Is that about right?
Well, sure. I always had an entrepreneurial mindset. So even at 10 years old, I was thinking about how can I hold a garage sale and how can I get merchandise to sell at a garage sale. So I think it's been in me all along, which is interesting. My father was just a professional research and development person, always working in large corporations. So I'm not really sure where it came from, but it sure felt right the whole time that I was always looking there. And the bigger structures with all the paperwork and the different corporate structure that you have was never uncomfortable, but it just wasn't as rewarding.
Did your dad show you his work from time to time, or was he able to take you with him for some of the meetings?
So great question. He worked, let's see, the first time I went and saw what he did, he worked at General Electric in upstate New York. Very big, massive plant. And there were three things I really remembered. He had an office, which I just thought was amazing. I think I was 7 years old. So I thought, really, there's another room just dedicated to him. That's interesting. And they had food delivery trucks. I had never saw that before. And again, my mind was like, I bet you I could do that. And I wonder how much money they make. And I wonder how much work is involved. So even looking at that, and the scale of what they did at that plant was enormous. They made very large castings for enormous pieces of equipment. So you could really see, and even then at that age, I could tell this is a big undertaking. It takes a lot of people and a lot of resources to be able to make one of these things. So it left an impression of me on me of how they did what they did. And what I remember most is it was interesting. Really enjoyed seeing the inner workings of something behind the scenes that most people don't get to see. So it was great.
Neuroplasticity at its finest. You're expanding your mind as you're observing, and that's at this young age. That's great, and I see it becoming a norm almost that people or teenagers between the age of 10 and 20 are exploring themselves already, and they're able to get hands-on experience because of the power of the internet and YouTube at university and what have you. So I'm glad you're able to do that as well directly and seeing how it operates at the large corporations like that.
And you mentioned a few really important things there. YouTube has changed the planet because you have an audience, so you can find out how people respond to what it is that you have to say and what it is that you do. And before that kind of proliferation, it just you didn't have an audience. They were much, much smaller. I can remember Dali during the 2008 housing crisis. I think one of the good things that came out of that, you had a whole bunch of when you have a bull market where there's a lot of buyers for anything and the economy is doing really well, some people who really aren't the best at running a company or the best at leading people or might have a decent product but maybe not the best, when you get into that bear market, which is what happened after that housing crash, those folks and their companies are generally the first ones to fall apart because they were fragile to begin with, and they end up going back to work for companies that are doing it better and have a better trajectory and they have a better fit. So it's so interesting you mentioned the YouTube thing because I think that was a hard lesson for a lot of people to learn that I've invested maybe many years and life savings into a company. Now it's falling apart and they kind of tend to feel it's the economy, but really it's the competition. So
Mm.
the very strong companies that can continue doing what they're doing and survive those downturns since they're unpredictable when they're going to come down the line. But that YouTube and that all of the streaming media and all the platforms that give you an opportunity to see how people respond and react to what you have to offer, man, game changer for knowing who you are and trying to figure out where you fit and what you like to do and what you call success and how you might reach it.
You shared a keyword here, competition, and I have a short story to share. And if you allow me to,
Please.
I observed a downfall of a company in agriculture space back in Europe that was growing for many, many years, and they were employing about 80 people, which is quite significant for suburbs locations where there's so many people and families essentially provide for, help providing for. And the downfall started to happen because of lack of adaptation. That was a time before the internet, or before the internet era, but the digitalization era, what I wanted to say. The problem was phones. They were started introducing phones, mobile phones, to companies where you could communicate with people that were in fields, so you could, your teammates, you could call them, get information, and essentially you didn't have to wait until they come back or return from their business travels or operations and tell you about it. And that founder was very, very hesitant to implement anything of that. He was completely against it. And that began, that was one of the things obviously that contributed to it, because again, his competitive landscape has changed significantly, and they started adopting quicker, and that took his business away, and that had horrible outcomes. So adaptation, being able to observe and zoom out and observe what's happening, and essentially adapting to the new norms is important as well. Which leads me to the next question. I'd be really curious to hear your take on it. In your entrepreneurial journey, what were the major shifts that you have observed when you look back, maybe, every decade or every 5 years, or something new that came out, or something that completely shook a lot of companies and corporation enterprises that you were involved with, or somehow in some shape or form? What were the major shifts that you've seen?
Well, that's a great question, and you could pick 10 a year if you wanted to, but let's just take some big ones. And I hate the first one because it kind of dates me, but the 1999 to 2000 rollover. Again, I'm in systems, so the enormous amount of work that went into the notion that computers would stop running, they would stop processing correctly, airplanes would fall out of the sky. It was the no shortage of real fear about what was going to happen because of an inherent, let's just call it design, not flaw, but consideration in that computers weren't expecting to roll into the year 2000. So we were a little unsure. A lot of work went into that. And the rest of history, we all see that. We talked about the 2008 housing issue in America, the crash and the economic ramifications that happened across the world. That was a game changer for a lot of people. The COVID supply chain reality, where people now discover if supply chain is stressed to a point, it affects everything. And that was really quite amazing to live through, watch, and see. I hesitate to even say this again because people are tired of hearing it, but the AI revolution, the change in how AI has become readily available and how it is growing and being put to use. I would say probably 40% of it, in my estimation, is being put to use pretty well. And the rest of it is for show or for fun, but certainly making images that look real, but they're not real, or impersonating other people is not, doesn't really have a point that moves the world further along, but it moves AI further along. But those are a few that have just been complete game changers at the time that they were occurring and had, let's just say, forever lasting effects on how people work even today.
Yes, technology has evolved big time. I can only imagine what happened or how it was in 1999 before 2000s. And that's so many things happened so rapidly, feels like so rapidly afterwards, as far as technology goes. You've been also involved in mergers and acquisitions. If you could share a little bit background sort of that, I know that's of a big interest for a lot of entrepreneurs out there.
Sure. Now that's one of the areas that I think gives me an edge over a lot of people that I've worked with and for, is having been on the entrepreneurial side in depth, multi-million dollar personal companies and employees and selling everything involved with being an entrepreneur, which means you kind of work for a crazy person. If you're an entrepreneur, you wear every hat, you got to handle everything that comes on the line. There is no other department to send it to. You've got to kind of pull it all together, make it all work, and deal with everything. And in the corporate structure, there's terms, stay in your lane, or other terms that just indicate that you've got your area, you've got to be a subject matter expert, in that, and allow the other people in the other areas to do what they do, even if you disagree with it, see how it goes. So having seen in depth both sides, fascinating. The corporate sides get an awful lot of stuff right. They have resources that are usually far beyond the smaller company, and things like safety and planning. And talked to a executive of a very large computer company once. I mean, one of the top three in the world, and asked him, how long does it take when you decide that somebody's not right to remain in the business? How long does it take you to exit them from the business? He said 1 year. Now that's he drew the whole thing out. 3 months doing this, 3 months doing this, 3 months doing the first one again just to make sure, and then 3 months to do the exit. And when I asked him, do you think that makes sense for most companies to do? He goes, oh, absolutely. And I thought, a lot of companies wouldn't make it. But what I'm saying though is to the benefit. If you can find that right place for an employee, if you can find what piques their interest and you can help them achieve it, then you're moving forward with somebody who's now interested in what they're doing, and maybe has a better trajectory. And again, back to that 2008 housing bubble crash, it taught a lot of people, yeah, I can't survive in that, so I need to go back to where I'm under somebody else's guidance. Those were just great lessons. So what I've learned out of working in the PE market and for the PEs, and how fast they move and what their direction is very different than an entrepreneur's growing a business, is that it all serves very important functions, and it's all very relative in their space. And if you get that wider view of what all of these companies are doing and how it better positions you to know where you fit and how you can be part of those efforts to the benefit of the wider organization and to yourself. But again, back to know yourself. A famous one I'm known for: I can sell, not a good salesperson, because I accept no for an answer. What I am is I'm a good company rep, meaning if we need to discover whether or not our products or services are right for you and how you might utilize them, I'm your guy. But if the goal is you have 10 of these already and I need to sell you two more, that's not real. But we need those people. We don't want to live in a world, in my view, where you have an idea, you want to do something, and somebody on the other side says, "No, I disagree. So I don't think you should spend your money that way." No, the answer is no, not going to sell this to you. We need people to be able to make their own paths, their own mistakes, learn by those mistakes. And that's how the real successes come. Is I think humans have come to be in the level that we are in the world through the biggest tool we've used is mistake, where you make a mistake, you learn from it, you try again, you make a mistake, you learn the next. I mean, Walmart wasn't built in a day. It took many, many failures of other companies to get to the combination that worked. So there's nothing to be afraid of with mistake. And I don't know anyone who does anything perfect.
Yes, I wish to someday meet that person. But
I don't think they exist.
I think they exist. Well, maybe never know. Maybe somewhere Elon Musk is discovering them somewhere out of space.
Oh,
You've
no.
mentioned Sam Walton at Walmart and brought the story from the book where he traveled, I think, to Brazil, and he was slowing himself down between the aisles to find out the distance between one aisle and another to find the winning edge. Why there's more better operating stores somewhere in Brazil and not in the United States. And I think they put him in jail for a day or something like that back then. So that's how crazy he was. Speaking of working for a crazy person, how crazy he was when it comes to finding those little improvements and then something that maybe that you don't know and others know or figured out. But I want to take a spin on the team management because obviously in a corporate role, as you said, if they have 1 year to lay someone off, to that they probably have a lot of time as well to find a person for the find the right fit for the person for each person, each teammate. How does it work outside of the corporate world for smaller businesses, privately held companies that want to grow and maybe they don't have the luxury of having enough time or enough bandwidth or financial resources to keep enough people on the team so they can find the right role for them. How does team management work on a smaller scale within smaller scale companies?
Yeah, that is just a terrific question, and I hope I can get through it fairly quick. It's a little complicated. There's talents and there's skills. Skills can be taught. I can teach you to weld. That's a skill. But to be a talented welder, you have to be combined with interest. So you have to want to do it really, really well. And that to me is a measure. There's a line, it's attitude and aptitude. If people have the right attitude and they have the aptitude to learn what they're doing, then you're at a good starting point. If you get that together with their interest and those three things align, chances are they're going to do really well. But it's really hard to do well when you're not really interested. So I think in the corporate world, they have more training, they have more documentation, they have more teams and more resources engaged. But at the same time, they almost remove the sense of urgency or the intensity level. I had a conversation with an executive just a couple months ago with a mistake I thought they were making, which was if you look at high performance teams and you think about how they talk to each other, what's off limits and what isn't off limits. When I mean high performance teams, just picture the locker room of an NFL team. What do you think is going on in there? Do you think they're protecting people's feelings and being cautious not to offend anyone? Or do you think they're engaged at a higher level in terms of they're taking risk? In a corporate environment, and certainly the one that I was dealing with a month and a half ago, all of their rules, all of their policies, all of their procedures went to the other end of the spectrum. They really catered to the people who don't do well when there's any level of competition or if there's any level of potential somebody's feelings might get hurt. They actually had a rule in their manual in their employee manual, which was you're not allowed to discuss any political or social issues. And in my world, people are doing better when they do communicate. They're doing better when they have respectful conversations. And this is what we were discussing, me and this other leader, is that by telling people it's off limits to talk about things because somebody might be offended, I prefer to teach people how to read whether or not this conversation is one that is becoming offensive or whether or not somebody is not liking it. Learn how to step back, learn how to not push your beliefs or your philosophies onto anyone else. If people want to engage in a conversation, that's great. If they don't, then you should respect that. But making the entire conversation off limits, kind of a surprise to me. So there's a mistake that some of the corporations make is they're, for whatever their reasons are, they're really catering to the people on the other end of that spectrum, which means those high performers probably don't want to be there. They're feeling better to be in a part of a team where they're not ending up in the HR office because they're passionate about what they're trying to do. So back to your question, I think if you can effectively measure people in terms of their interest in what they're doing, their aptitude for what they're doing, and they have a good attitude, then it's on you to figure out how to motivate them. And one of the key ways that I think you can do that, or that you can tear that down if you don't get it right, is what I call the supervision and the direction model. Everybody on the planet, from every leader of every company, every leader of every country, all the way down to anybody on the planet, needs a level of supervision to be at their best. Meaning, if you over supervise somebody, they tend to feel micromanaged, and that doesn't foster people being autonomous and doing well. If you under supervise somebody, like a good example is if somebody's habitually late and you don't work on correcting that and achieve correcting that, if you just allow them to not be supervised on that, they're not being at their best and they know it. Most people who are habitually late, just as an example, if you were to talk to them about it, they're not surprised. They know, and they know that people in the meeting are waiting for them and they're showing up late. So if you get supervision right, which is incredibly individual, you have to look at each person individually and get the exact right amount of supervision for them, then they're not self-defeating and they're not micromanaged, which means now they can really accelerate. And direction is a totally different part, but exactly the same principle. A lot of people can be told, this is where we're headed, and they can see the path. They know the steps they need to take and they got it. Other people understand the goal and they know what you're talking about, but they can't envision the steps that they need to take or the role that they play. So those folks are not, you know, bad folks for not inherently understanding what the steps are. They just need a little more direction. And some other people need a little less. So I think if you get supervision right as an entrepreneurial leader and you get direction right, combined with the other things we've already talked about, you really set the stage to have a company with, a high percentage of people that are engaged, happy to move forward, enjoying what it is that they're doing because they're the right people in the right place with the right leadership at the right time. And that buys you a little bit of credit to survive the difficulties that come up through work as they come up, because you're always going to have a bumpy landscape in front of you. But if you're fragile and you haven't built up a good reputation, rapport, and your people who you're working with don't feel, empowered and ready to embrace those challenges, if they're fragile, then it's easy for people to topple over.
And that brings the Anti-Fragile book to mind.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah. That was a great one.
That's a good book, and he gives great lectures as well. And I think there's also an ego at play when you've mentioned the executive level. And I look back at my journey as well. There's always some sort of, not only from me but from others, from other leaders and the team as well, that if we're not all aligned with the mission, with the goal, the outcome that we want to accomplish, that the ego might play too much, and it will be tough to add any sort of supervision there. But I love the analogy to sports, because it's teamwork, and it's teamwork for a reason. If there's no teamwork, usually what happens is your team loses, and it might even lose any sort of possibility to win any trophies whatsoever. And then essentially you have a bunch of people that don't want to work together, they don't want to play together, they don't want to accomplish any goals together. So that's also a big part, I can imagine, of teamwork, where putting together a team is very, very important to have people that are coachable, that are okay with, even the best athletes have coaches as well. So that's the great analogy to sports as well. So I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I think it's also, since we're on the sports topic, it's really easy in the sports world to know what good looks like. It's usually winning enough games to get to the next level, the playoffs, and then winning enough of the playoffs to get into the final, and then perhaps winning that one. And even the janitor, even the CPA and the finance people, everybody in the entire sports organization knows exactly what the goals are. In business, it's a little harder. There's a wider range of possibilities. And you certainly have a lot of other people who have a harder time. So I think that's a good place to start, is asking people who work for you, do you, in your opinion, what does good look like for the company? And you get a very wide
Mm.
range of answers. And then you start to understand that I can set a goal of, we want to improve, productivity from 37% to 39%, and I can give them the direction of how to do that. But if everybody has a different vision of what good looks like, that's a tough one to then keep people rowing the oars in the same direction or singing from the same hymn book, if they're just in fundamental ways not knowing and agreeing for what good looks like. And a lot of leaders don't necessarily understand what good looks like, and how incrementally, like, getting from 50% of a goal to 75% of a goal is a lot easier than getting from 75% to 80%. And as you keep getting up higher, to get from 90% to 92% is sometimes almost impossible, because your changes are much smaller. I mean, the measurement is much smaller, but the changes that need to happen start to disrupt a lot of other things. Sometimes telling people what good looks like is just simply how much progress we want to make, where somebody else is thinking, oh, we have to get all the way to 92%. No, no, if we get from 50 to 60% in 2 months or 4 months, that's what good looks like.
Knowing what good looks like is definitely a good question. Sometimes those simplest the simplest questions are the toughest one to answer, and might leave you with weeks to contemplate on what does it actually look like. What are we trying to accomplish here? Good point there. You've mentioned earlier that you would consider yourself, or you are, a system guy. What does it mean to be a system guy?
Great question. So here's a standby for me. Any organization I work in, I have this poster on the wall: system, procedure, personnel. You can take every problem that exists in business and put it into one or more of those categories. And it's very important to identify, what are we working on before you start working on it. So system, if the system is flawed, right? It doesn't matter the procedure to operate the system, and it doesn't matter the personnel following the procedure. You're not going to get the result that you're looking for. So the system itself is very important. I'll give you a good example. I'm going to pick on a company without calling out their name. There's a very big retail company that delivers just 50 billion packages a day, and they've become very popular in the past 15 years. And there isn't a one of us who hasn't ordered something this big and received it in a box that big with it flopping around. And you think to yourself, did they run out of boxes? No, they didn't run out of boxes. Their system is incomplete. They have processes where they just don't have a good answer for it. So they've written in, hey, this is the box you use for that thing. And we know it's silly. We know it takes up all kinds of space on the delivery truck and unnecessarily. And people are going to open it and go, this is silly. But it's just something that they haven't fixed. When they get packaging right, of which so many other companies in the world have gotten packaging right, where they've spent a lot of time getting their packaging correct, and now it's optimized on the delivery truck and it's optimized to protect the product. They just haven't got there yet. So there's a good example of a system that no matter who operates it, you're still going to get the result that you get. So the systems that I'm talking about are systems can combine paperwork, they can combine process, they can combine software, they can combine hardware, everything that produces the result. Now, the procedure is the operating manual. Ask a Navy pilot how deep they have to go into studying the operations manual of the aircraft they're going to operate, and it is incredibly detailed. So your procedure is your interface between the person and operating the system. If your procedure is deficient, which the way that most procedures are deficient is they draw out the precise path if everything goes well.
Mm.
But if something doesn't go well, they usually don't have those offloads. Hey, if you get this error message, here's what you do. And if you get this one, because that's a lot more work. But a really good test of a procedure, in my view, take an employee, new one, hand them the procedure and go, here it is. Take any notes about any stopping points you get into or any challenges that you have following the instructions, anything you encounter. I'm not going to stay with you. Go ahead and execute. When you're done, let me know. And sometimes they come back and go, yeah, I got to step 7 and here's a screen that popped up and there's no answer for what to do with that. So I'm not sure where to go. And so that tells you, you've got to update your procedure. Now, if you've got good systems and you've got good procedures and the personnel are failing to execute it correctly, not a problem in the system, not a problem in the training. You've got to evaluate, are they on board, not on board? Are they capable, not capable? Or are they pushing back? What do we do here? But again, any problem that you have in business that needs to be solved, it can be one or more of those categories. So I really feel like that's a good kind of top-down explanation of me being a systems guy. Is I believe if you have the right system, things and the right procedures, the right personnel, things are very slippery. They don't require brute force. Things flow. And when you have something wrong in one or more of those, it's usually pretty clunky. There's a lot of brute force to try to get something through the system. And at the end of the day, you will never scale and you'll even not meet your current deliverables and your customer quality requirements and on time in full deliveries. You just won't get all of that if you're having to brute force everything through your process. So there's a big need for the customers, for the business, and for the employees to get those three things as slippery as possible.
That's a good explanation right there. And I know that you are in a transition phase. So I guess we can say, how do you spend most of your days nowadays?
Wow. I am always busy, happy to be busy, multiple ventures. I have an invention that we've been working on for about a year. Just we're in this very critical phase where we're working on the patent and there's some, let's just say, some more effort there than what we counted on, which is not a surprise. And then there's this theory. We want to test market this, but if we test market, we're showing our car. Other
Mm.
people who could compete with it will see it. And as they see it and go, we could build that. Then we got about 18 months before somebody else is manufacturing and kicking that product out. So the question is, how do we build a manufacturing effort that can scale enormously? How can we get our distribution network so that it can scale enormously? Because that's the real protection we're going to have, is if we take it to market, it goes well, we can scale it, then that's the caveat for the other folks going, they've got it sewn up, let's move on to something else. It's kind of like, it's interesting that in the chicken market with all the chicken restaurants, there's a lot of burger restaurants, but you look at these chicken ones, and there's one of them that usually stands out that people go, wow, they're just crushing it. Lines out the door all the time. And it still doesn't stop these other chicken only restaurants that seem to be popping up, but I don't think they really compete. So again, back to if you were going to open up a restaurant, I don't know that you would focus on a chicken only restaurant given how strong they've got that market kind of. But again, there's another burger joint that came out of Florida many years ago. I know that they had like a racing flag as their one of their advertising items, and they showed they weren't ready to scale. They took off. They really did very, very well. They started trying to scale, and today they're small in comparison to everyone else, where they really had an opportunity. So this whole getting your systems, procedures, and all that right to be able to scale. With this invention, that's where we're at, is where we don't want to push that button, put it in the market if we're not ready. We have another venture that we're doing. It's a retail environment that will be competing with one other retail environment. And that's the reason we want to do it is there's only one. And they're doing very well, north of 1,500 locations across the US. And again, nobody else is competing with them. So we're thinking, why would nobody compete with them? There's room to compete with them. So we're on track with that and trying to go live with that. I think September of this year. We put a couple of years into that one. So yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff going on in our environment. But I will work until the day they take me out on a gurney. It's love what I do. I love working with people. I love seeing the result. I love getting my hands into the mix and just playing that role of working with everybody, seeing the amazing talent of the people that work with you and for you. And it's really beautiful when things come together and you have more than one winner and they're able to, feel good about how they spent their time. It's just an amazing feeling. It's just like parenting. That it's one of the most important things I've ever done in my life. My wife and I, 1,000% aligned, 3 kids, and just couldn't be happier watching these little versions of us go out into the world, make their own way, and show us all these different ways to do things that we never would have thought of. It's amazing. So yeah, that's the real body of work that comes out of this whole thing is just
And
watching how people progress. It's all about people.
and that perfectly taps into what you said earlier. To want to excel at your role, you have to have an interest in it, and exactly that's what you're doing. You're having fun, you're enjoying it, and that's why you can be pretty much competing with anyone there. And I remember one of my clients, whom I visit from time to time. Every time I visit his office, during our conversation, he will say, "Matt, I love what I do, and if I die, I'll die at this desk. They'll drag me out of this desk. I will not leave. I will stay here on this desk and continue to work because I love what I'm doing and I work as much as I can. My kids are out of house already for a few years. They graduated. They're good. Then I have nothing else than spending time with my wife and working. So I do both all the time.
Yeah.
That's always a great thing. And that brings me to my next question. What is that gives you what is that thing that gives you that fulfillment in what you do when you look back at your few decades of your entrepreneurial journey? What gives you that fulfillment?
Wow. There are so many things. I'll try to highlight a few. One of the businesses that I was involved in very deeply for a number of years was providing systems design and support to other companies. And we had 230, 240 other companies that we worked with over maybe 10 years. And it was really great to see that they didn't have anything even close to the resources in-house that we brought to the table. And to go in and look at their systems and help re-engineer, redesign, find out where we can remove manual work, where we could put in automation to free up people, because most people think automation is about eliminating workforce. It's really about repositioning workforce.
Hmm.
It's about people don't need to do repetitive, non-thinking jobs. The brain is very powerful. So let's get them doing the work that is better suited, and that's how your company can scale and do new things. It takes that power. So watching companies progress, absolutely amazing. Seeing them just do much better and giving them more opportunities for everybody. Another thing that I think is super fulfilling for me is you make a lot of connections with people who are just very hungry to have a leader who listens to them, or a leader who considers what's important to them, or helps them reach their individual goals. So watching companies reach their goals, that's one thing, but watching individuals, much more personal. And it's rewarding in a different way, thinking to yourself that you have made a difference in somebody's life, that they've taken a principle, they've adapted to it. Maybe they never really read before, and you give them a good book that's a good read and helps them. By the way, that's one I found that's amazing. Some people will take a book and read it as if it's their next 5-year Bible. They plan on invoking every principle that that book says, just like they say how to do it. And that's going to be their operations manual for the next 5 years. And I know a lot of other people that, and I fall into the second category, that'll read, 15 books a year and read them kind of quickly and try to get out of them some things I might do. But it isn't about deploying the whole book in its entirety. And I don't think there's a wrong. There's just different approaches to how people do that. But it's things like that where the most people have ambition, most people have an outlook of something they're interested in. And playing any small role in that, golly, volunteering with the kids, that's been huge to me, and that'll be something I do until I can't anymore. But children don't always have an environment that teaches them their potential. Sometimes the environment they're in never really fosters that. I think the public school system does a little bit to try to help people figure that out, but not near enough. And I don't think the world puts talent only in certain pockets of the world. I think talent is spread out pretty evenly. So you could pick any neighborhood, any environment of any continent, and you can find an equal number of people with real potential to do very big, great things. If you give them the right nutrition and the right education, that brain grows and they're ready to go, and they can take on some pretty big challenges and solve some pretty big problems. So working with the kids has always been very amazing because that potential is just seemingly unlimited, although it isn't.
And there we go. We're talking about neuroplasticity again.
Yes.
Development.
Yeah, neuroplasticity is I mean, it's well understood, and it starts to go away as you age.
Yes, there was this nice, really interesting term. Since I love words, and there's this one term that I remember when it comes to decline of our cognitive function. Maybe it will come to me. But I wanted to mention a book since we're on this topic called Flow or The Flow. Flow. I think the book title is just as simple as Flow by a guy who you will never try to even pronounce his last name, or some Russian professor. And it's a very famous book. I think the flow. He wrote many books. Those are maybe not books, but those for his lectures. How do you call it? Textbooks. A lot of textbooks instead of books. But flow is actually a book that is digestible, I would say, and everyone will understand. But essentially, the flow state, which is the main core principle of that book, is that state where your brain develops at the fastest, you're enjoying yourself, and you're growing, making progress very, very rapidly. So the flow state is something between where a task is not challenging at all, too challenging for yourself. So something in between where you can still be, again, challenged, however, not to the point where you're going to give up on a task because it's absolutely out of your range, or where it's too easy and you get bored because it's so easy you don't have to develop it, any other skills in that space. So that's a great book. I see it a lot amongst entrepreneurs and even in the corporate world, the flow. And you've mentioned earlier automation, and you also said reshaping of the workforce, which brings me to a question about artificial intelligence. Do you think it brings chaos into systems or more helps it organize it better?
Expertly deployed, it is nothing but good. But what I mean by expertly deployed, you have to have guardrails because in order for AI to be most effective, you have to give it access to all of the data, all of it. And what you don't want to do is have somebody who's not supposed to have access to certain parts of that data read the results of having access to that data. So you need a governance model. Microsoft uses what we call RBAC, which is role-based security, where you can just put people into roles and then that's allowed. But again, AI is most powerful when it has access to all the data. What AI does primarily is process data. Now, what really makes AI different than anything else that was out 10 years ago is they've just connected it to the dictionary. That's all that's happened. They've taken computing power, fed it the dictionary, and said, listen to what people ask you, use the dictionary and common language to figure out what you think they're doing or they're asking, and then go do it and come back and give them the results. That is not the newest. It's not the first time it's ever been done. There was a search company many years ago, maybe 15, 18 years ago, Ask Jeeves, I think is what it was called. And then it just became ask.com. But first it was askjeeves.com. They had a little picture of a waiter and they announced for the world the first natural language search engine. And before that, Google was commanding everything, and Google still did. But Google was all about knowing how to put a search term in order to use their algorithm. But it was not natural language. If you used natural language, you got results back that didn't meet what you were really asking. So that's what they've done with AI. They've given it access to all the data and they've given it the dictionary and said, understand how people talk and let them ask away. So when you look at it that way, we say, I got to have the right security so that people can't see what they're not supposed to see and allow AI to see all of my data. It does a very, very good job of processing the data. Now, downside, people can never be left out of considering how it came to those results. When AI gives you an assessment and they tell you, they're really telling AI is telling you based on what it thinks and what it knows. It's a elimination engine, so it's just eliminating some of these other things and saying this is what you need. When in reality, some of those things it eliminated might be the thing that you need. So I don't see it overtaking the way people fear that it might. But it does, for example, a great job of really looking at symptoms and then showing you all of the possibilities that other people might miss because they're not trained in this one weird disease that happens to be on the other side of the planet. And so they've eliminated it already because they don't know it. So there's all kinds of use cases where AI is doing tremendous jobs. It helps you with your sales forecasting. It can tell you if you're paying the right amount of money to your vendors versus what other people are maybe buying for because it has access to all that data. So really it's just a data processing engine with natural language.
What's fascinating to me the most about this is the speed of it. I mean, it's so incredibly fast. The way it processes data, how quickly it processes data, not always accurately, of course, but yes. But you raise a very important aspect here: the cybersecurity or protection of your data. Some people overly trust it and just feed it all kinds of information it shouldn't be feeding it, and it's going to be, but yeah, I don't think it's safe enough. I don't trust it to that degree for sure. Especially now that they're announced that they're probably going to launch advertisements on ChatGPT and other platforms, which is quite the opposite of what, in my opinion, what was the intention behind it. But I guess that's the advertisers' money talks, and it's quite a big chunk of money. So it's definitely going to change the landscape of AI for sure. But I remember also one of the interviews from the NVIDIA founder who said that they've been using AI for nearly 2 decades now on a daily basis. It's nothing new. We just it's accessible for everyone else. For us, it's new. Most of the people, the population, let's say, all around the world. So that's very very interesting. But I agree with you on that parts of it. If you let me get into the philosophical part of the conversation, David, just so you're aware of that. If you had an opportunity to sit across the table from young David, who's just starting out, what advice would you share with him?
Oh boy, interesting question because it's really about me and I tend to think about other people long before I think about myself. So that's why it's an interesting question to me. I don't have any warnings that I would give. I know for sure I wouldn't say, hey, don't make this mistake, don't do that. Um, I haven't really, I've never intended in my life anything other than as many win-wins for everybody as possible. Uh, so I think intent is enormous in understanding people. If people have the right intent but the wrong result, that happens. If they have the wrong intent, maybe you need to stay away from them. So having always had the intention of just being a team player and not being sitting on the sideline unnecessarily, but also not demanding that that I supersede somebody else. I wouldn't have any advice on how to govern my behavior. I think I would advise myself to maybe take the risks a little sooner, become comfortable sooner in not striving for perfection in order to launch. There's a lot of Dave Wagner that has been critiqued from other people that, hey, get it to 85% and turn it loose. Don't wait for the 95% in order to turn it loose. You can get a better balance of getting something out there and letting it start to grow before you get it perfected. And so I think that's something I would advise young David to do. Another one I think I would advise myself to do is be a little bit more cognizant, aware, and pay more attention to your delivery. That I had the teacher who touched me on it said, picture your favorite meal, and now picture it if I took a dirty garbage can lid and plopped it on top of that. The delivery has something to do. It's not just the
I like
content. And it took me that to understand that in my earlier parts of my career, I thought being direct and a little bit less filtered was respectful to people, and instead of maybe coloring what you were saying and maybe being less direct or less full and less complete. But I've since learned that, here's a great way to describe it, that this happened in a management class that I attended too. They said, the president of the company gets angry, yells at the assistant gets angry, yells at the person in the operations plant, they get angry, yell at the person in the mailroom, they get angry, yell at the FedEx driver. FedEx driver goes home, dog walks in front of him at the wrong time, and he kicks the dog. That trickle effect, it would be better for everybody if the president just drove to the FedEx driver's house and kicked the dog
that.
and left everybody else out of it. And they were discussing how systemic the way you treat people or the way you say things to people, not from how you intended it, but how they received it, how important that is. Another way that they got the point across, which I thought was brilliant, is they said when you go to correct somebody, there's either an outcome that you want different or there's a behavior that you want different. When you do that, you have to be so laser focused on your audience and knowing how they need to hear what it is that you have to say, because here's what your goal is. When they turn around and they walk away from you, you need them thinking about what you asked them to think about. They need to understand what they need to do and at least understand how you think they should do it and when they should do it. What you don't want is them turn around and walk away going, jerk. If you're going to get that result, just don't waste anybody's time, because you're wasting your time if they're not thinking about what you need them to be thinking about, and you're wasting their time. So I think I would advise young David, pay more attention to mastering the art of genuine delivery, because it can't be pretentious. It shouldn't be fake. You can't be acting. It's really that skill. People can learn the skill of how to evaluate the person they're going to talk to, how they need to hear the information. Sometimes you need to be a very sparse talker and do a lot more listening. Other times you need to be middle, sometimes higher, but know your audience and learn how to do that skill, because if you're going to lead people, it's the best way to help them is make sure that you're communicating with them in a way that is effective with them.
What a great advice. And if I can just add to it, I think our communication will be much better if we leave our devices out of it and just try to be present. I think that's the biggest thing nowadays. And that applies to personal life and business life, because if you're walking around meetings or even walking around wherever there's an opportunity to have a conversation, meaningful conversation with your teammates, and you have a phone in your hand, or you're thinking about grabbing your phone to send an email or send a text message or answer to somebody, and you're just not present. I think that's at least what I've observed. It's and that applies to me as well, and to all the parents, all the executives, all the leadership, and everyone in between, to be present in every conversation that you're having. So great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I see that in conference rooms all the time where some people are bringing their laptop and they're just banging away on that laptop, and a slide can come up that they're supposed to narrate. They don't even know. They're just cranking away, and somebody else to go, hey, This one's for you. Oh, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't even I I turn my phone upside down, silence it. I'm 1,000% paying attention. If I don't need to be in the meeting because there's no role for me to play, I'll excuse myself from the meeting and I'll go be productive. But if you're in the meeting for good reason, yeah, 1,000% agree with you, Matt. You should be 100% present. And certainly when you're working one-on-one with somebody, giving them your time until it reaches conclusion for them is most effective and respectful.
I like that. Yes, that's a great advice too. Well, David, it was a power hour. Flew by like a few minutes. What are you excited about the most for? Well, it's already February pretty much. Oh my God, I feel like I wanted to say beginning of the year, but we're halfway now Q1 already. So what are you excited about the most for the rest of the year?
Well, I feel like 2026 is on the tail end of a recovery period. We haven't gotten into the midterm elections yet, so things don't get all wonky when that happens. We've had supply chain recovery in a lot of areas. We've absorbed tariff impacts, which were disruptive. We've got a lot of opportunity across the entire globe. Companies are expanding. I saw Jabil the other day, and their hiring is ticking up. So those are all good metrics. There's a lot still to be seen about how it comes, but I feel like the marketplace and the market space for companies to do better, for employees to have more options where they could choose different paths if they want to choose because they're available. I feel like we're reaching another critical point in information dissemination. AI isn't really new anymore. They're starting to hone it and get it into where it's more helpful than it is entertaining. I really feel like 2026 is going to start to approach some of the good gains we were making in 04, 05. COVID is long done and all those hardships that came along with it are gone. I really feel 2026 holds promise for most people if they allow it, if they participate on what's available to them, if they adapt to the structures that are out now, and instead of trying to fight against them. You can't change the world very easily, so sometimes it's best to adapt than it is to reject back. But I really think 2026 is going to be a growth year for everybody who wants to grow, and it's available to everyone.
And that is what I wish you and everyone who's listening. Absolute exponential growth and lots of health and up into the right curves across the board. So definitely great wishes for us all, and hopefully 2026 will not underdeliver. Better over promise.
I
Thank
hope
you so
so.
much, David. It was an honor and pleasure to have you on the podcast. I'm looking forward to our future episodes together and seeing you online, and then hopefully also one day in person, and have another great conversation together.
Thank you, Matt. And I really appreciate your time. I've seen the body of work that you do. It's so important. It comes from the heart. It also comes from capability and skill that you have. You're really in a right role doing great work and touching, a lot of people. So it's quite a pleasure for me to sit with somebody like yourself that does what you do and the scale that you do it in. It's great to see. Love what you do, and I hope to be any part that I can be that makes sense.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, Matt.